I'm David Taylor. I'm an attorney here in Twin Falls, and I started my firm about a year and a half ago. And like to thank you all for being here. I think this is important stuff, and we'll have some fun. I think it's nothing like talking about the government. So hang tight. Get my screen up. All right, so welcome. This is a presentation on elder law, long-term care planning, Medicaid planning, long-term care insurance, just about all those things that can be handy in taking care of us or a loved one, a family member, anything like that. So just a few things. Of course, I'm an attorney, so we have to start with a disclaimer. This presentation does not include legal advice. Legal advice includes an engagement letter, personalized facts and responses to those facts and suggestions. This is just general information. So please just use this primarily. I hope you use this to get this information, and then you can use that to decide what's best for you and what's best for your family. Or you can wow your friends at the next bar trivia night. During the course of this meeting, please feel free to use the controls that are on the bottom. You can submit questions to me at any point, and I'm happy to answer. I know there's also a chat feature. I try and watch that as best as I can. So yeah, at any point, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, get my attention, and we'll make sure your questions are addressed. So a little bit about me. I'm David Taylor. I grew up in the Boise area, and I interned at an estate planning firm during law school, and that's where I learned how to do the basics of estate planning, elder law planning. And as I was leaving that firm towards the end of my law school career, I was married and had two kids. They were about 3 years old at the time, just under 3. And so we had to make some decisions on what we were going to do in life. And we decided to take a job here in Twin Falls under the advice of my mentor, who taught me that before I should do estate planning, that I should really learn how to be a traditional attorney. And he told me that I should go out and experience what it's like to go to court, to lose in court, to win in court, to deal with adversarial confrontations and things like that. And so with that advice, I took a job just in Twin Falls, downtown Twin Falls, at a traditional law firm, I guess is what I call it. But I was surprised to see how the traditional attorneys practiced estate planning. It was very different, and I don't mean to pick on the firm where I worked at, but traditional attorneys have a different approach to estate planning than I do. What I found is that attorneys are really good at solving problems, right? So you go in there and you say, hey, I have this problem. I want to sue someone, or this person is giving me grievance, or this person won't leave. That you come to an attorney with the problem, and that attorney is trained to solve the problem. But for some reason, that doesn't translate to preventing a problem. And I don't quite understand why, but the solution for the traditional attorney was not necessarily to prevent the problems, but how to mitigate damages, if that makes any sense. Let me just give you a quick example, then we'll go into this. Whenever I did someone's estate plan when I was a traditional attorney, because this is how I was taught, I would sit down with the people and I would explain to them what probate is. I would explain to them what the laws are, what could happen to their family. We'd even talk about long-term care. We would just have a conversation, and then I'd take out a pen and start writing down the things that they wanted to make sure happen. And the feedback I got from my bosses were basically, that's not the way you do estate planning. And one day I did sit down with my boss, and this is what he said, whenever I do an estate plan, someone comes in for a will, I charge them $400. My assistant does all the work, and then I just hope they come back to me for something bigger down the road. That was the approach of estate planning from the traditional attorney, and I didn't like it. And so that's why I ended up starting my own estate plan. And so that's why I'm here. And as I developed my estate planning practice, I still look for ways to solve problems. And to me, the ways to solve problems is, of course, to prevent problems. One of the reasons why we're here today talking about all this is because The problem that I'm seeing is I get a lot of calls from people when it's too late. And this is in regard to long-term care. Usually someone is in a nursing, and actually, true story, not even an hour ago, I just got a call from someone in a nursing home, and they needed help setting up a Miller Trust. I don't expect you to know what that is, but all I want you to know at this point is those are very disheartening to me to do. They need to be done, but basically a Miller Trust is a last ditch effort where someone is making too much money, but they need government assistance. And so you basically pour all of their income. So whatever they're getting, usually, sadly, it's a veteran's benefit. You pour all of that income into a trust, and the government is going to then allow them to be on a government benefit. Why? Because when that person passes away, all of the money in that bank account or in that trust account goes to the government. That's just how it works. So that's why it's always sad for me to do those. So I found that quite often I would get calls from someone in a nursing home concerned about government benefits, concerned about how they're going to pay for their long-term care, and it was usually too late. And another thing that I saw happening is people don't understand the implications of Medicaid, which hopefully at the end of this course you will. But when someone goes to apply for Medicaid, typically what happens is, the caseworker or the staff member, whoever it is, just basically gives this person a form, and they fill out the forms, turn it in, and they don't understand the implications of what they're doing. This will make a little bit more sense as we go on, but I just at this point wanted to make sure you know why I'm here. I guess what I'm saying is I feel like it's my job to educate, and I don't try and sell people anything. I just try and educate. My dad was a car salesman. He was a car salesman all his life. He's the salesman. That did not get inherited down to me. So I feel like it's my job to educate. And then the people that I serve, they can decide whether it's best for them. I do have plenty where I will sit down and educate them, and they just decide not to go with me, or they decide that they're okay with the plan in place. And I think that's the way it should be. You should have the education. I'm the one that went to law school, and you don't need to hear everything I learned in the 4 years of law school, but you do need to hear about an hour's worth of what I learned that can help you make the best decision for your family. So here's some facts about long-term care. So on average, about 52% of the people who turn 65 will need long-term care at some point. And that's a pretty significant amount. So you think about everyone who is over the age of 65, at some point they're going to need long-term care. Half of them are going to need long-term care, more than half. And in 2016, the national average for a private nursing home room was $92,000 a year. That's a lot of money, especially when someone's retired. And usually people retired will say that I'm living on a fixed income. $92,000 a year, you think maybe you have, $500,000 in savings, retirements, that's going to go pretty quick. And in Idaho, our legislature believes that the average cost of nursing home care is $8,458 per month. So about $8,500 is the average. We're in Twin Falls, it's probably going to be a little bit less than that. I have seen some around $4,000 to $5,000, but I've also seen some around $12,000. The price varies, but it's quite a bit. And one thing to think of as well is in many cases, it's spouses. Usually there's one spouse who is in need of nursing home care and one who doesn't. That's the case I come across a lot. So you basically still have one spouse at home who has all of those expenses, taking care of the home, and then you have another spouse who's in a nursing home, and somehow we have to come up with an additional $8,500 a month to take care of that person. So why did you come today? Hopefully this is an educational experience for you. Maybe you are concerned about long-term care. Maybe you have a loved one, concerned with long-term care. Hopefully some of the answers I would like to see is that you came here for, total assurance and comfort that you're going to be taken care of. And this may not make a lot of sense at this point, but you also want to make sure that you protect your assets from going to the government. I would imagine most of us have heard at some point that if you don't have a will, the government gets all your money. That's not exactly accurate, but it is possible for the government to get your money when you pass away. And I'm going to explain how in a little bit. Another thing that also comes up that maybe we don't think of is incapacity. And this is something that I have to explain to clients that I do, because when we think of estate planning, what we think of is where all my stuff goes when I die. And a lot of people come in and it's usually the dad, like, oh, I don't care what happens, I'm dead. And I get that, but estate planning is more than that. Estate planning is also taking care of you while you're living. And how do we set up a plan for in case you are incapacitated, dementia, Alzheimer's, any of those things? That's a very big component of elder laws, making sure that there's a plan, just in case you become incapacitated. So if you came here for any of those reasons, then you're in the right place. And again, like I said, I just hope this is an educational experience for all of you. So let me give you some of the basics of elder law and basically what I do. But elder law, there are a few components to elder law. There's the planning side, and then there's the execution side. And execution side, this is not what I do. You typically need a litigation attorney for this. The execution side are things like elder abuse, whether it's physical abuse or financial abuse, family abuse, something like that. Some kind of situation where sadly a family member or a staff member, someone took advantage of a senior citizen. And that is not what I do. The side that I do is on the planning side, which basically what we do when we talk about elder laws, we plan for incapacity, we plan for death, and primarily we plan for long-term care. If I can just distinguish for a minute between estate planning and elder law, estate planning is basically incapacity and death. Those are the two things you plan for. Elder law is more robust than incapacity planning, because we're going to assume at some point you're going to be incapacitated. And so we put together a very robust, solid plan for incapacity. And the second thing is we also do planning for it's kind of like estate planning on steroids. We don't plan just for death, we plan for incapacity, and we also plan for your life. How can we structure your assets and make sure that you can pay for your long-term care? Or if you can't, what legal recourses do you have? How can we get you to pay for your long-term care? That's elder law in a nutshell. So just some basics about this before we can get into some of the nitty-gritty. When we talk about incapacity planning, what I mean by that is, I guess I should start with this. I try to avoid court and controversies. I'm one of those strange attorneys where I don't like court. I hated it. I didn't like going to court and suing people over $1,000 trailer. I just wasn't passionate about it. But in the law, if you are deemed incapacitated, meaning that there's a point where we think you can't handle your finances, you are writing checks to the preacher at midnight, you are getting scammed from the government. What was it? It was the lottery, the Jamaican government lottery. Story about that. I've had many stories about that, but this gentleman was swindled by the Jamaican government lottery, and they were getting money from him, and he was just, every time he picked up the phone, he would just give money over to the Jamaican government lottery, whatever that is, but these people just made it convincing. He was a very, religious, gambled or anything like that, so who knows how they swindled him. But of course the family caught wind of this and cut him off from everything, took his phone, and said, sorry, you can't talk on this phone anymore because you're getting swindled by the Jamaican government lottery. Well, one of the family members was visiting him, and turns out a taxi driver drove up to the house. A gentleman left the taxi, went to the house, and delivered a prepaid cell phone. So this Jamaican government lottery needed to get a hold of this elderly man, and that's how they did it. Is they realized that he got cut off from his phone, and they had a solution for it. And so that's how they did it. They sent a taxi, someone came out to drop off a prepaid phone with, sure enough, the phone number to the Jamaican government lottery so they can call it and get more money from him. It's scary out there. So these are the kind of things that happen. And once they start happening, if you don't have a plan in place, our recourse is to sue you. So if mom or dad end up starting to get dementia and not thinking straight, that's what you end up having to do, is you have to take them to court and prove it. And it's a very demeaning, dehumanizing court proceeding. It can get costly because in a lot of cases, these are contested because there's children who just don't want to let go. But that's why we make a plan for incapacity, is because without a plan, we could end up having to sue mom or dad. And I don't think anyone wants that. Some of the other things is planning for the inevitable. Another component of elder law planning is planning for death, but I hope you all understand it. It's not hard to plan for what happens with your assets when you die. In Idaho, that you can actually do what's called a holographic will, where you could just sit down at a restaurant on a napkin and say, hey, I want my property to go to John when I pass away. Sign it, date it, that's a will. No witnesses, no notary. So kind of strange. So why do you see an attorney to do this? And one of the things I tell people is my process is to make things easier for you, for your loved ones when you pass away. Not just where your stuff goes. We'll figure that out. And of course we have a plan for that. But I don't think what people realize is that without the right kind of planning, your assets are going to get locked up in probate for 6 months, even with a will. And that's not really our discussion today, but this is this is what I do, is I explain things and I educate people. So now on to, of course, why we're here is elder law planning or long-term care planning. And without the proper planning, then you could be, or your loved ones could be subject to paying $8,500 a month for long-term care. Or all of your assets could end up going to the government when you pass away. We're going to talk a lot about the government. I don't want you guys to walk away being like, man, that guy hates the government. It's just, it's just really what the laws allow and what the government does. And that's just kind of how it is. We do get to have some fun poking fun at the government, but so some fundamentals of long-term care planning. One of the first things I need you all to understand is that Medicare does not pay for your long-term care. Very common misconception, because people think it's healthcare related. It's not. Your long-term care is your housing, and Medicare does not pay for your housing. So here's the difference. Medicare, you turn 65 and you get it, right? That's easy. All you have to do to qualify for Medicare is turn 65. We don't care how much money you make. We don't care how much money you don't make. You could live in a $15 million mansion and you can still get Medicare. There's of course different components to Medicare, but that's how it works. Is it's a government benefit for our senior citizens, for those who have turned 65. So the main point I'm getting at is Medicare is for your health, but it does not pay for your long-term care. If you are in a long-term care facility, they will only pay for 100 days of your care. And after 100 days, then you're on your own. One quick caveat to that, the laws actually say it's 100 days or until a physician deems that you are permanently going to be needing long-term care. I personally have not seen anyone make it to 100 days. It's usually sooner. At the point when the doctor says this is permanent, that's when Medicare stops paying for it. In contrast, Medicaid, so in order to qualify for Medicaid, we're going to talk more about that in a minute, but to be qualified for Medicaid, basically you have to be poor. And if you are poor, then we're going to pay for your long-term care. So government benefits, they set up two benefits, one to take care of our elderly for their health care when they turn 65, and another government benefit for our elderly to take care of their long-term care, but only if they're poor. That's basically how it works. So here's some options when it comes to long-term care planning in its simplest form. We have three options. There's the do nothing plan, there's a long-term care insurance, and there's legal planning. So we're going to talk about all three of those extensively. And just a quick reminder while we're here, like I said, if you have any questions, put anything in the chat, just let me know. Maybe I'll just take a quick second to check and make sure. Any questions so far, feel free to do the Q&A, feel free to send a chat. I don't see any yet. So buckle up, because we're going to go for a little bit of a ride now. All right, so the do nothing plan. The do nothing plan, pretty basic. You pay $8,500 a month for your long-term care, for your nursing home care. And some pros and cons to that. Of course, we all have to do kind of a risk analysis to see how much of an investment we want to make into this. Are we going to have long-term care? What's the possibility? I think a lot of people who come to me to talk about Medicaid planning, I usually bring it up. I usually, we'll be talking to someone about doing their estate plan, their will or their trust, and they're 65 years old, maybe have $1 million or less in assets. And I just ask them, what's your plans for long-term care? Oh, my kids are going to take care of me. Okay, have you had that discussion with your kids? No. Do your kids still have kids? Yes. Do you really think that's going to work? A quick story on that. This is something near and dear to me. My grandpa, his spouse, so my grandma passed away in 2000, and at the time he was living with me, with my family in Boise, and he had seven kids. One died about a year before grandma, so he had 6 kids to choose from. And between 4 years, so from 2000 to 2004, he was bounced around between all 6 children. All 6 children had him in his home for a few months, and then for whatever the reason, they just couldn't take care of him, and they kicked him down to the next child after child, until finally in 2004, he was here in Twin Falls living with my aunt and uncle. And my aunt and uncle, bless their hearts, did their best to take care of him. They were a last resort. They could not take care of him. And this is, again, after several months. I mean, everyone did their best. Maybe close to a year. But they eventually had to put grandpa into a nursing home, where he lasted for 3 weeks and then he passed away. So yeah, your kids could take care of you. My grandpa was fortunate that there's 6 to choose from, but I don't think we realize the burden that we're putting on our children. I've seen it firsthand because my mom took care of my grandpa, and it's hard to take care of a human being 24/7. And not to mention, the care that's needed, that 24/7 care, that basically quashes your children's lives. I mean, they can't do anything else. No soccer games, they're taking care of you. So that's a very hard ask, but that's commonly what people say is, oh, my kids aren't going to let me go into a nursing home. Well, they might, because no offense, but a nursing home is probably better care than what they can provide, because a nursing home can provide you with 24/7 care, not like your children. Obviously, your children love you more than, the staff, but there's only so much a human being can do to take care of you when you come to that point. So anyways, let's say though that you do end up in a nursing home and you're paying $8,500 a month. Just as I said before, that's going to go pretty quick. That's a lot of money you're paying every month. And a lot of people don't qualify for Medicaid right away, but after a year or two and living in a nursing home paying $8,500 a month, they are going to qualify. And that's usually when I get the call when it's too late, is they say, hey, my last option is Medicaid. Can I stop that? The answer is no. You ran out of money. That's what Medicaid is designed for. You pay what you can until you run out of money, and then Medicaid kicks in. So neither of these are an ideal solution, but that's commonly the solution clients choose. One quick note on this. This is a great opportunity to work with your financial planners. I believe, and you're probably not going to hear many attorneys say this, but I can't do this on my own. I need the assistance of trusted advisors, financial planners, CPAs, insurance agents. You know, I know enough about these services and these products to talk to clients to help them make an informed decision, but I don't write these policies. I think that it's when it comes to long-term care planning, it's a really good conversation to have with your financial advisor. Just ask them and say, hey, how am I going to pay for my long-term care? Do I have enough? What happens if, or blame it on the attorney. This attorney I heard said I have to pay $8,500 a month for long-term care. How's that going to work? Hopefully, your financial advisor has already thought of this. I try and get the financial advisors that I know. I try and have them talk to the clients who are about 65 and, like I said, probably around $1 million or less in assets, maybe a little more than $1 million, but just to have that conversation to say, hey, look, this could happen. What's your plan? And if your financial advisor can help you structure your assets, make sure that you have assets coming, you know, annuities, all these products, that's a great conversation to have with your financial advisor. But that's essentially the do nothing plan. But so let's talk a little bit about, while we're on the subject of how does one qualify for Medicaid. So let's say you do need Medicaid, and here's the process for it. I'm going to divide this into 3 categories: past, present, and future. Medicaid is, I should if it's not clear yet, Medicaid is confusing, and it's very difficult to understand why we did this, but you know, that's what we have. I can't change the laws, so this is how it works. So just bear with me as we go through this. So put yourself in this scenario. Let's just say hypothetically, you're at a point where you're in a long-term care and you're just curious about it and say, hey, I think I might need Medicaid. Maybe this is years down the road and you say, I once heard an attorney say that I could qualify for Medicaid to pay for my long-term care. Great, so let's start with the present. So this is when you're filling out the form for Medicaid. In order to qualify for Medicaid, you have to have less than $2,000 per month in income, and you have to have less than $2,000 in resources. Now, typically when I share these numbers, I get a lot of responses to say, oh, I'm not going to qualify. Probably not, but bear with me for a minute because, like I said, it's just kind of a ride. So that's the general rule, is you have to have less than $2,000 per month in income, and you have to have less than $2,000 in resources. And these vary for married couples, but I'm just trying to keep it simple today. I use the word resources carefully because I don't want to use the word assets. If I said assets, every one of you is going to close down the webinar and leave and say, nope, not a chance. And you're right, because if you having less than $2,000 in assets, there's pretty much no way that's possible. So instead, what Medicaid does is they call these resources. So what are resources? These are things that are available to you. Medicaid deems them available to you in order to pay for your long-term care. So as long as you have these resources, Medicaid says you're not going to qualify if you have more than $2,000 worth. Let's explain what resources are. The first one I want to cover is a revocable living trust. I only tell you this is because a lot of people get confused and think if they set up a trust that it's automatically protected from Medicaid. It is not. There are all sorts of different trusts. Usually a revocable living trust is done to protect your assets from incapacity and from probate. Those are the 2 primary things that you do with the revocable living trust, which I do a lot of those. They're great. But sometimes people just come to me, and same thing with the will. They come to me and like, oh, I got a will done. I'm protected from Medicaid. No, you're not. It takes a certain type of trust to protect you from Medicaid, which we'll talk about in a minute. Multiple vehicles. So Medicaid will let you have one vehicle. Why do they do that? Because they want you to be able to drive yourself to your doctor's appointments. If you can't drive yourself to a doctor's appointment, they have to. That's part of the Medicaid program. So Medicaid says, great, let's let people keep one vehicle. You could have a $50,000 Lexus and Medicaid will let you keep it. But if you have multiple vehicles, say if you have an extra van or you have that commuter car or something like that, Medicaid counts those as a resource because in theory, you could sell that vehicle and help pay for your long-term care. Bank accounts, that's pretty much a given. If you have a bank account, you can't have more than $2,000 in it. Why? Because if you have more than $2,000, then you can use that money to pay for your long-term care. Life insurance policies, this is kind of a weird one to me. I don't understand quite why they do this, but generally, if you have a life insurance policy, they require you to cancel it. There's some exceptions to this, but that's the general rule. Pensions. So if you're getting a pension and that increases your monthly income, because keep in mind, maybe I didn't say this yet, that $2,000 in income, that includes your Social Security. So I would imagine most on Social Security get paid probably around $1,500 a month, maybe a little bit more. Well, if you have something like a pension or you have a veteran's benefit, that's going to count as income. Same thing with the required minimum distributions. Retirement accounts are a little strange, and they're on the bottom because technically the money in a tax-deferred retirement account is not a resource. So that sounds like a great thing at first. So you say, oh, great, David, I have $50,000 in a retirement account. That's not going to count as a resource. Yes, you're right, but you have this pesky thing called a required minimum distribution, where the government requires you to withdraw a certain amount every year. So that way the government gets paid taxes, and that counts as income. It's not a resource, but it does count as income. All right, so far, hopefully, hopefully this is okay. Oh, sorry, I forgot one. Your primary residence, that is not a resource. Medicaid lets you keep your home as long as it is under $850,000 in value. Why? Because Medicaid doesn't think that you're going to sell your home to pay for your long-term care. They're giving you the benefit of a doubt. They think that you're going to return back to your home someday, and actually, they want you to return back to your home someday. So they don't force you to sell your home. So you think about this, if someone has a $500,000 home, they have a $500,000 retirement account, it's still possible they might qualify for Medicaid. So again, going back to what I said earlier, where it's $2,000 in resources, that's a very big difference than assets. Because if I just had assets, no one's going to qualify. But there's certain assets Medicaid counts. There's certain assets Medicaid doesn't count. So that doesn't seem too bad, right? Because you could just say, yeah, look, I have a $500,000 house. That doesn't count as a resource. I have a $500,000 retirement fund. That doesn't count as a resource. I have $2,000 in the bank. Okay, not bad. But of course, there's always a catch with Medicaid. So let's talk for a minute about why they do this, about why there's catches in this. You think about the things I just told you, how you just have this much in resources. And let's say that you're at a point where you go to a nursing home and you're probably, a smart person, and you're probably going to think, man, I'm going to outsmart the government. I am just going to get rid of all of my assets so I can qualify for Medicaid. Yeah, great idea. I mean, it really is. And if you think about it, if I told you all these things of how to qualify for Medicaid, what people think is, well, I'm just going to give all of my assets to my children when I die anyways. Shoot, I'm just going to give it to them now. I'm going to give them all my assets except for, the ones that don't count. And then that way I can be eligible for Medicaid. So the government got wind of this, and they created what's called a 5-year look-back period. And what it means is that when you go to apply for Medicaid, so the day you apply, let's say it's November 1st, 2020, Medicaid is going to look at how you gifted your assets within the last 5 years. So they go back to November 1st, 2015. And if you either gifted an asset or if you sold an asset below fair market value, then they're going to assess a penalty. I'll talk about the penalty in just a minute, but for right now, I want you to understand this concept is this is a deterrent. Medicaid does not want you to just give away all your assets so that you can qualify for Medicaid. And let me give you an example. This 29-year-old kid came to my office about 3 months ago, really sharp, savvy kid. He's the only child, and his dad is in a nursing home. And so, he of course uses Lawyer Google and figures out all these schemes of what you can do. And he starts looking at the gifting rule. And he says, oh, okay, so dad can't gift me all of his assets. I've got an idea. Dad is going to sell me his home for $1. He showed me the paperwork, and he thought that he had outsmarted the government and said, look, dad sold me his home for $1. That's not a gift. And I had to tell him, sorry. One of the other rules is if you sell an asset in the last 5 years for less than fair market value, that's going to assess a penalty. So Medicaid is aware of what's going on here. And so they're not going to let you just show up and give away all of your assets and qualify for Medicaid. One other quick note on this, when we talk about giving assets, we also talk, that includes putting your assets into an irrevocable trust. I'm going to skip ahead for just a quick second. I hope you all know that there's a fix to all of this. And one of those fixes is to put your assets into an irrevocable trust, and that will qualify you for Medicaid. But that counts as a gift, so it has to be done 5 years before Medicaid, before you apply for Medicaid. Bear with me for a minute, and I think that will make more sense. So then the next question becomes, well, what's the penalty? And I'm trying not to get too much into the weeds here, but there is a formula for how the penalty is assessed. It basically is the value of the gift divided by the average monthly nursing home cost, and that's the number of months you disqualify for Medicaid. So let's say the value of the gift during that 5 years, you gifted away something that was worth $85,000, and Medicaid is going to look at that and say, okay, that's $85,000. We're going to divide that by the average monthly cost of nursing home care, which they've deemed is about $8,500, and that number equals 10. 10 is the number of months they are going to disqualify you for Medicaid. So what it looks like in application is you go to apply for Medicaid, you submit your form, and great, you qualify for Medicaid. Congratulations. However, for the next 10 months, you're going to have to pay for your long-term care on your own. After the 10 months has passed, we've got you, bud. We're going to start picking up the bill after that time. That's how the penalty works, is that it doesn't disqualify you for Medicaid necessarily. It just disqualifies you for a certain amount of months that you won't get Medicaid. Could be 10 months, could be 20 months, could be 60. It's just, you just got to be careful with that, but that's what Medicaid does if you're trying to cheat the system, cheat the government, whatever it is. All right, I hope you're still buckled tight because we're still not done. But this is the last component about Medicaid. And this is probably the worst part about this all. So let's say you overcome all of these hurdles, right? Let's say you overcome the 5-year look back, you get Medicaid, and you have a few years where you are on Medicaid, and that pays for your long-term care, and it all worked out for you in the end when you pass away. But there's this pesky thing called the estate recovery. So think about this for a minute. When you go to buy a car, because I pick on car salesmen, as you probably heard me say, my dad is a car salesman. When you go to buy a car, in theory, what's going to happen is this car salesman is going to explain the terms. You're probably going to dicker over the terms, like, I want this for such and such an amount. They go behind the smoke glass, and then they come back and they come up with an amount, and then you talk about the financing and the interest rates and the payoff, and you go through all these terms in theory, right? Not with Medicaid. There again, you just submit the form, turn it in, and most people don't understand what I'm about to tell them. And the reason why the government gets away with it is because it's in the law that says they can do this. And there's this theory that's called ignoramus non exculpa, which means ignorance is no excuse. If it's in the law, we're going to assume that you knew it. That's just kind of how it is. That's why it never works when a defendant goes to court like, I didn't know that was the law. Sorry, we don't care. Okay, so all that to say is, let's say you get Medicaid. What you don't realize, what you probably don't realize, is that Medicaid keeps track of every dime they spent on you if you're over the age of 55. When you pass away, they want every dime back. So somewhere in their system is they're keeping track of every check that they cut, every time they pay for your nursing home care at about $8,500 a month. And when you die, they want it back. And I've seen that amount be anywhere from, I think the lowest I've seen is 4,000. Someone just had Medicaid for not even a month. And I've seen it in 6-digit figures too. And I've seen some surprises too. I have had one probate case where the husband was on Medicaid, and we knew that he was. He was on Medicaid, and his wife of 5 years. So he was married to this woman for about 5 years, and then she passed away. Well, when the Medicaid bill came, when he passed away, so husband passes away, and we get a Medicaid bill from him. We expected that, and that was about $12,000. But lo and behold, turns out his wife, who we barely knew, she was on Medicaid too, and she racked up a bill for over $30,000. And so the family got stuck paying her bill because that's the way it worked, is they don't collect on this until you die, or if you're married, they don't collect until the spouse dies. That's the estate recovery. It's basically, it's like a glorified loan. The government has just given you a glorified loan to pay for your long-term care. It's not really a benefit. That's kind of a misnomer, because it really is a loan. But let's put this into application for a little bit. Now do you see why Medicaid lets you keep your home? Let's think about this for a second. And I often think of like Alex Trebek. You've probably seen those reverse mortgage commercials. The best part is you get to keep your house. Medicaid kind of does the same thing. But remember when I said earlier in my example, you get to keep a $500,000 home. Well, of course, because Medicaid's keeping track of the bills. And if you end up paying if they end up paying $8,500 a month for you, they got to get their money back somehow. So yeah, they're going to let you keep your home, because when you die, they're going to get paid and say, oh, sorry, you passed away. It looks like you owed us $108,000, and you need to pay us back when you sell the home. That's just the way it works. Is they let you keep your home. That's how they get paid at the end. So now let's talk about some of the alternatives instead of Medicaid. Hopefully, as you're going through this, you understand that Medicaid should be a last-ditch effort. Really, if there's a way to structure your finances, work with your financial advisors, let's do it. Here's another alternative that we're going to talk about, and then we'll put this all together here. But this portion, what we're doing here are the fixes. How do we fix this problem so we don't end up on Medicaid and we don't end up giving our money to the government? One of the things that you can do is get a long-term care insurance policy. Now, and just as a quick aside, I don't write these policies. I just know enough about them because I feel like that's important. Whenever someone comes to me for an elder law case for Medicaid, these are usually the conversations I have is, hey, let's look at some alternatives before we go down this road. Now, there's long-term care insurance, basically is an insurance that covers you in case you need long-term care. In its simplest form, that's what it is. But there's 3 different types of long-term care insurance that I found. The first one is a use it or lose it. Very much like your car insurance. If you drive your whole life and you are paying $100 a month or whatever it is, and you never get into a carmobile accident, it's kind of wasted, but you needed it. Same thing with long-term care insurance. If you end up needing long-term care insurance, then it helps. If you don't need long-term care insurance, then it was just wasted money. That's the use it or lose it one. Very, very uncommon these days. I see us going away from that. I don't think the insurance companies benefited from that one very much. The next one is a life insurance with a rider. This is a little complicated, but the way it works is you purchase a life insurance policy. Life insurance meaning you die and they cut a check. But there's a rider on with a long-term care option. And what that means is that during your life, you have a life insurance policy, you pay a premium. If you need long-term care during your life, then what will happen is that life insurance policy will convert to a long-term care policy, meaning you no longer get the death benefit. So let's say you have $1 million life insurance policy with this rider. Well, if you need long-term care insurance, rather than getting the $1 million when you pass away, you're going to get a long-term care insurance policy to help you pay for your long-term care insurance during your life. So the main thing is you don't get both. You either get the death benefit or you get the life benefit. But the nice thing about that is either way, you get a return on your investment. Because if you don't use it, if you don't use long-term care, you get money paid out when you pass away. Your children or your heirs, whoever it is, they get money. But if you need long-term care, then you get long-term care paid for, or at least some assistance with that. That's option number 2. Option number 3 is what I call a premium guarantee. And what that looks like is you're paying a premium, and it's expensive. I mean, we're talking about $300 to $400 for an individual per month. It's a very expensive policy, but the way this works is that if you end up needing long-term care, then the insurance will pay for that. You know, there's a deductible and everything like that, but the insurance generally pays for that. But if you don't end up needing long-term care, then every dime that you spent on the premium, so paying $400 a month, let's say you pay for that for 10 months, that's $4,000. They're going to cut a check for the $4,000 to your beneficiaries. So either way, either you just basically given them a no interest loan, or you cover yourself for long-term care insurance. That's actually a pretty good policy, just because no matter what, you get something from it. That's long-term care insurance in a nutshell. It is an option, and like I said, I like that option better than Medicaid planning if you can. But here's some of the hurdles with long-term care insurance. Is usually it's expensive to price-sensitive clients. And I don't know, I hear it a lot from our elderly where they just say, I'm on a fixed income. I hear that so often. And I get that. And I think what they mean by that is, their income is coming from Social Security or it's coming from their retirement plans. Many of these individuals have money, like they have money in the bank account, but just having to spend more than what they're getting every month freaks them out. And I get it. So to pay an extra $400 a month is difficult to do. Plus, with some of those plans, there's a potential to lose your investment. Again, not all of these plans are really ideal because you do have a potential where you're either going to lose the investment or you're going to give an interest-free loan to the insurance company. But those are things you might need to do. Perhaps the most difficult part about long-term care insurance is you have to qualify for it. This is where a lot of people are out, and this is where I actually get a lot of clients, is because the financial advisor is doing his or her part, talking about long-term care insurance, and during that discussion, the client says, "Oh, but I have had a heart attack," or "Oh, my dementia has already started to set in," something like that. You're going to be disqualified. You have to be healthy for it. And so that's when I come in. So that's usually one of the cons about long-term care insurance, is you have to qualify for it. The pro, like I said, that's a much better option than mine. And I tell people that. I tell them that the legal services I provide, which we're going to talk about next, those should be a last-ditch effort. And if we can get you qualified for long-term care insurance, we're gonna get you to an advisor, and we're gonna get you long-term care insurance, because that's a better alternative. So when that isn't an alternative, then let's talk about some of the solutions for it. So there's basically 3 solutions, and those solutions include your foundational planning, your crisis planning, and a Medicaid asset protection trust. Let's talk first about, just briefly on this foundational estate planning. Like I said before, usually when you do a will or a trust, that's not going to provide you with protections against Medicaid, but there are some things that I can do to help a person plan for Medicaid for incapacity, or maybe there's some things that we can do to protect some assets. A very popular example is we can put the home into a Medicaid protection trust, and at least the home, if nothing else, the home is protected from the Medicaid payback. So there are some elements with the foundational estate plan that can help someone qualify for Medicaid, or at least avoid the government payback. But those have to be done right, and usually that's a discussion you have to have with your attorney about what you're doing to plan for long-term care. So the other alternative is crisis planning. And that's a legal plan for someone who typically needs Medicaid within a year or less. And what we do with that is we try to protect your assets as best we can. This just to let you know, my process on this is I charge a contingency fee for this. And the reason why I do this is because we just make some aggressive moves, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And that's the reason why. But generally what we try and do is that the end goal is to make you eligible for Medicaid immediately. So that usually means someone has too many assets, too much in assets, and they need something done so they can qualify for Medicaid, because they're going to run out of money pretty quick. There's not a lot that we can do to protect your assets at this point. There are some things we can do. And that's why I said, again, we get aggressive and we try and move your assets around, or we try to restructure your asset. There's these things called personal service contracts, a bunch of tools that we have to primarily qualify the person for Medicaid and also to protect what assets we can. Well, that's crisis planning. That's kind of like, that's a very popular one. As someone says, hey, I'm running out of money, what can I do next? And this is what we do. The Medicaid Asset Protection Trust is perhaps the best way to plan for Medicaid, but it does come at a cost. And I don't just mean my fee. I mean, there's a fee with this. It's expensive to do, but it's a plan for someone who anticipates having Medicaid in the next 5 years, or more than 5 years. Going back to what I said in an earlier slide, when you set up this kind of trust, which we'll talk about more right now, when you set up this trust, when you transfer money to the trust, that's a gift. And as we just learned, that gift is a penalty. Basically what happens though is you bankrupt yourself in the eyes of the government. You put all of your assets into a trust that you no longer have control over, and in the eyes of the government, they don't count that as a resource. Now, this is confusing stuff. This is hard stuff to swallow sometimes. So let me just tell you what we're really doing here. This is called legal money laundering. That's what it is, legal money laundering. And what I mean by that is what I'm explaining here is not a loophole, because a lot of people come to me and they're like, hey, you're messing with the government. You're screwing around with the laws. No, I'm not. There's actually a law that says you can do this, not something that's hidden in the law, but the law comes in there and says, if you set up an irrevocable trust, then we're not going to count that as a resource. So all we're doing is we're saying, all right, the government authorizes it, then we're going to put it into an irrevocable trust. So once you do that, you basically bankrupt yourself, and then you put all of your assets into this trust. And two things happen with it is, number one, because you bankrupted yourself, the government doesn't count that as a resource. So you could have $5 million in these trusts, and the government's not going to count that as a resource. Now, a quick note on that, for me, ethically, I wouldn't do that, even though the law authorizes it. If you have $5 million, pay for your own long-term care. But I just want you to understand that concept. The second thing, probably most important, no estate recovery. You put these assets into a long-term care, into a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. The government cannot go after your assets when you pass away. So, you put $1 million in there or whatever it is, you put your home in there, and Medicaid can't recover that when you pass away. And I know there's a question in here. I'm going to get to that after this slide. So in comparison, just to kind of go over some cost, a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust is expensive because it's very difficult to do, and you're navigating. I mean, like I said, legal money laundering is what you're doing. But you think about it this way: it's about $4,000 more than your traditional estate plan. So whatever it costs to get a trust, things that you should do anyways, it's about $4,000 more than that. About the cost of, I would say, with everything put together, with all your power of attorney documents, healthcare documents, it's probably about the cost of 1 month of nursing home care. Is it worth it? I mean, that's for you to decide. And one thing to think about is if it is an additional $4,000, we spread that out between 5 years, that ends up only being about $60 a month. compared to long-term care insurance, which is about $300 to $400. So again, these are just all things that I give the education, and then the clients can decide, what happens with it. Is it worth it? I guess is the question, and that's usually what I pose to the clients. And I just say, you tell me. I put it out there. This is the price. This is the cost. This is what your life will look like once you do it, and you tell me if it's worth it. If not, then at least you know. So there's a question in here, and I'm going to answer it as best as I can. But just one quick caveat: it's hard for me to answer these factual questions because I can't give legal advice. But if it's okay, I'm going to read it and I'll answer as best I can. So it's a situation involving dad, and the grandparents have a home and a property that was put into a trust, and both grandparents have passed away. Before their death, so before grandma and grandpa passed away, they placed two of their sons and their spouses on the trust. The trust is still active, but his dad is worried about losing his Medicare, Medi-Cal is what they call it in California. If they dissolve the trust and the house is under his name, could he lose his benefits? Can the trust be moved into another trust? Great question. So in a very long story short, it sounds like dad has Medicaid. He's already on Medicaid, and there's a potential for him to get more money through a trust, or a grandparent passed away or something like that. And the answer to that depends on the structure of the trust. If it's a well-written trust, then there's a term in there that says that if any of the beneficiaries are on a government benefit, then we're going to take some action to make sure that they still qualify for their benefits. That's called a special needs trust, or it could be called a supplemental needs trust. But that has to be in there somewhere to say that there's precautions that can be taken. And I'm going to give you just a real quick theory on that, because this happens quite often where someone is on a government benefit, such as Medicaid. So I've just explained to you that you can't have more than $2,000 in resources, and someone is going to get an inheritance. So someone passes away, mom or dad passes away, brother, sister passes away, something like that. They're going to get an inheritance. If there is not a provision in place, then that person is going to be disqualified for their benefits. Why? Because Medicaid wants to get their money. And so I guess I'll take a step back. They're either going to be disqualified for their benefits, or they're going to have that money, their inheritance, go into what's called a first party special needs trust. And a first party special needs trust is a way of saying, hey, you get the money, you can use the money while you're living, but when you die, whatever's left in that trust gets paid to the government. That's kind of the way it works. So it's a very complicated scenario, and it's hard for me to answer that question because I don't know what's in the terms of that trust. But that's why for those who are out there considering maybe not so much elder law, but doing a will or doing a trust, if you ever wonder why you see an attorney compared to doing it online, because all of my documents have a provision in there for that. Even if your beneficiaries are 18 years or younger, because you never know what's going to happen. And it's not too hard just to put a term in there that's probably not going to be used. You just put a term in there that says, hey, if any of these beneficiaries are on government benefits, just a second, and then you are authorized to do whatever is needed to let them still have and preserve their government benefits. Thank you for that question. Hope that answered it. And like I said, if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to let me know. All right, so where does this all start? Let me explain my process. I think that it's important, again, to give that education in a more personalized sense. And the things that I've spoken about today are usually things that I talk about with nearly every client. And again, just so they can see what's out there and what they need to protect. Are they concerned? That's up to them. And so what I do is I do what's called a family asset protection meeting. I used to do an initial consultation. That was pretty much nothing more than a meet and greet and a sales pitch. And now I converted that into family asset protection meeting, which is a 2-hour meeting where we talk about the assets, where we talk about the potentials, we talk about the law. I'm not charging that fee these days because of COVID and everything that's going on, but if I could, I would charge about $500 for that, for a 2-hour meeting to go over all those things. But the whole point of that is to allow families to make the right decision, to know what's out there. Again, this is not the traditional attorney approach where you just give me some names, I write them down, and then we put together a simple will, and then I never see you again. You know, this is more of a let's talk about the options, let's talk about the law. You tell me what concerns you, and we're going to put together a plan that resolves all of your concerns. One quick note, and then we'll talk about I'll open it up to any other questions. For anyone who registered and participated today, special offer I have for you if you want to come in and sit down and talk. And if you do end up going with a trust-based plan or an elder law plan, there is a discount provided for that. We just ask that you call us by the end of the week to set up your appointment. It doesn't have to take place this week, but just call us by the end of the week. Mention the webinar, and if you decide to go for a trust-based plan, we'll give you a $250 discount. If you decide to go for an elder law package, we give you a $500 discount. All right, so I just want to thank everyone for coming. Like I said, this is very complicated. This is why I do it, because I get those calls from the nursing home, and many times it's too late. And so I feel like it's my job to educate everyone. So then that way, you know, you and your family can make the best decision for you. And with that, I'll just turn it open to any questions. I don't see any questions in here yet, but if you have a question, then now's the time. You can put it in chat, or you can put it into the question and answer, and I will be glad to do that. I'll give you just about 30 seconds here, and if I don't see from anyone, then we will go ahead and call it. I'm just going to, while we're waiting, oh yeah, so one question is this going to be provided online? Yes, so for those who registered, after we get this processed and cut and trimmed and bleep out all the profanities, then yeah, we'll send you a copy, or we'll give you a link to where you can find it. But all of these end up on my website at twinfallsestateplanning.com, so you can go back and watch them. I don't see any other questions. Okay, well, if you come up with any other questions, just let me know. But in the meantime, here's how, if you want to get a hold of me, here's how. After this webinar, you'll get a form, a survey. We just like to know, you know, what you thought of this, how we did. And you get an invitation if you want to let us know there. If you're interested in a family asset protection meeting, great. If you wanted to talk with me, there's my contact information. I am soon moving offices. That's my new address. We're over by Fred Meyer's where we're moving. One question was company for long-term plans. My suggestion for that is to first talk with your financial advisor. And if your financial advisor is someone like, let's say, for example, Edward Jones, I'm going to pick on them for a minute. Great company, no issues with them. Not a lot of these companies offer long-term care plans, but they broker them. And so they, even though they're not the ones writing the policy, they can get someone else to write the policy for you. That's kind of the way it works. So what I typically do is when someone's interested in long-term care, I like to have them first talk with their financial advisor. Now, if you don't have a financial advisor, then let me just pull up some contact information too. The person that I like to refer clients to is a guy by the name of Wayne Irish. He is I mean, this is really what he does. He just does long-term care insurance. And that's the reason why I like him. It's kind of like me, where, you know, I don't do family law, or I don't do any of those other kind of laws. I only do this. If I can say specialized, I guess I'll say it, but specialized makes it sound like I have a training in it. Just really, that's just my only practice, and he's kind of the same way. So I'm putting his information into the chat, but he's a good resource He's in Boise. I've known him for many years. I have not found someone here in, oh, sorry, his name is Wayne Irish. I've not found someone in Twin Falls who sells long-term care insurance like he does. Like I said, most of these companies that you work with, they broker it out to another company to do it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. So if you're looking for where to go for long-term care insurance, talk with your financial advisor. If something that's very serious you want to have a conversation with, I recommend you call Wayne. He's a good advisor. He's willing to come up here to Twin Falls to meet with people, but that's a good resource for me. All right, aside from that, I'll make sure I put it on here. I'm not sure if that went to everyone. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I don't think that landed in the chat, so hang on. Okay, now you should see it. Wayne Irish, Madison Pool, and that's his phone number. Other than that, thanks for attending. Really appreciate it out there. And like I said, hopefully you have some information. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm you too much. And if I did, then let's come in and let's talk about it. Other than that, thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your day.